Is Jesus racist? Well, that's a question I never thought I would need to answer, but it's 2021, and apparently that is the question on people's minds. A TikTok pastor named Brandan Robertson, Reverend Robertson, released a video recently saying that Jesus is racist, and he repented of his racism. After he used a racial slur, he was confronted by a woman and repented. We're going to dive into that today. There's been a lot of good response videos to this already, and so I'm dropping some of those in the comments for links, and I'm just going to give you a quick take on some lessons I think we can learn from this passage about how to understand the Bible and how to misunderstand the Bible, and also just look at some of the cultural dynamics at play. And there's something in this video that Reverend Robertson's doing that really bothers me because I think that he is being racist. And so based on my experience, what he's doing is something that we really need to avoid because it is not a way to treat other people, even people from history, that way. So let's dive in and see what Brandan Robertson is up to. To get started, I wanted to share with you a quick story about why I quit watching the NBA. When I was a kid, I loved watching basketball, but in 1998, when I was in high school, the players and the owners, they entered in a very difficult contract negotiation, and they ended up not playing basketball for the first part of the season. It rubbed me the wrong way. You see, I was living in the Philippines. My parents were missionaries, and as sort of a poor missionary kid compared to a lot of America, living in the midst of real poverty, when I saw these extremely wealthy owners and extremely wealthy athletes fighting about how much money everybody deserved and how much they would get, and then when I looked at the world around me, I saw people living in poverty. I saw people struggling. And these people, it's not even like they wanted a tiny portion of what these athletes wanted or what these owners wanted. And I saw these people struggling. I saw how wide this gap was. And I just looked at this negotiation going on. And I saw such entitlement, an expectation of look how much we deserve. And on the other hand, I saw people in such great need who just wanted anything and would struggle to get it. So that did not sit well with me. I quit watching basketball for a while. Since then, I've come to understand, I've come to see the nuance of the situation. I get it. It's business is business. But that cultural divide between my life there in the Philippines and between the Filipinos' life outside of my house, and then America and the basketball players, there was just this huge gap culturally in the life that people were living. And that's kind of what we see here in this passage. We see a culture gap. We see people from different cultures meeting each other, but also we are looking at this from a different culture. As Americans, we're looking in on a culture that is not our own. And the question is, are we going to do that with authenticity, that we look with honesty at what's going on, or are we going to whitewash characters out of existence? I'm afraid that's what Reverend Robertson does. And then the last piece is, this is a negotiation table. So we see Jesus meeting a woman in his own negotiation. So they are having, it's very reminiscent to the basketball. And how are the two parties involved? Is it going to be two entitled parties that both think that they're deserving and then they're like stuck at an impasse? Or is it going to be different than that? So let's take a look at what Reverend Robertson says, and then let's take a look at the story and see if these match up.
Do you know that there's a part of the Gospel of Mark where Jesus uses a racial slur? In Mark chapter 7,
It's a pretty big claim, right? So he's saying he's got Jesus, a racist, as the question, and then he says that Jesus uses a racial slur. That's a big claim. Let's see what kind of evidence he brings to back that up.
the account of the Syrophoenician woman, a woman who is Syrian and Greek, both of which there were strong biases against within the Jewish community.
Okay, so so far, this part yeah, there probably were some biases against her culturally. Did Jesus have the same kind of perspective as the more bigoted elements of Judaism, or was he in conflict with those? That's kind of a fundamental question we want to answer.
And she comes to ask Jesus to heal her daughter who's possessed by a demon.
Yes, that's true. So this is a good summary of what's happening. She does come and ask for this.
And what is Jesus' response?
He's about to outline what Jesus says. And this is where he needs to bring the receipts, right? So he needs to show Jesus using a racial slur. That's the claim he's made. So let's see the mountain of evidence that he brings.
He says, it's not good for me to give the children's food, meaning the children of Israel's food, to dogs. He calls her a dog. What's amazing about this...
Hold up. That is his proof. He just reads the passage and then he slightly misquotes it. This is not a racial... He's not said anything about a racial slur. What is going on here? You cannot say people use racial slurs and then not show any evidence. Tell us, how is this a racial slur? People have read this for 2,000 years and it hasn't been a racial slur. If something has changed, if there's new information, if there are facts that we don't know about, tell us them. But he just drops the accusation altogether. This is crazy. If you're going to accuse somebody of something, back it up. All right, so he doesn't back it up. Let's just continue with his story in the part that he does say some stuff about.
Account is that the woman doesn't back down. She speaks truth to power. She confronts Jesus and says, well, you can think that about me, but even dogs deserve the crumbs from the table. Her boldness and...
The woman doesn't back down. She confronts Jesus and speaks truth to power. This is an interesting interpretation. This is an interesting look at this passage. Let's look and see what the woman did. Yes, Lord. This is her confronting Jesus. Yes, she's literally agreeing with him. Lord, she's literally submitting to what he's saying. This could not be further from the truth. He has told us that this woman is confronting Jesus and speaking truth to power, that she is standing up, that she's demanding what she deserves. But instead, what do we have? We have a woman in humble submission coming to Jesus. Yes, Lord, but even dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. He is telling us that this woman is like a basketball diva who's showing up at the table for negotiation saying, I deserve this. Give me what I want, right? This is who he's painting a picture of. Somebody like, from his worldview, a modern American liberal, just like him. But the woman that existed in history, the real person, was nothing like this. She was not the same as the people who I saw in the Philippines who are struggling and who are in deep poverty. But she shared with them the desire for any help that she could get, the humility of knowing her place that she was in need. And she came to Jesus, not speaking truth to power, not confronting, but agreeing with him, submitting to him, and just humbly coming before him. That is who she was. That is what she did. And I'm really upset by what Reverend Robertson is doing here, because he is doing something that is deeply racist. He's whitewashing this woman out of existence. This woman, who is a real person, is so of little value. She's so worthless in his eyes that he can just erase her and replace her with a substitute woman who says and does different things. The message here is, if you are not in a modern American, culturally liberal person, then you need to be replaced. You need to be replaced with somebody who matches American culture. That is deeply problematic and racist. Growing up on the mission field, there are times where I saw missionaries struggle with this temptation, that Not only did they think they were bringing the good news of the gospel to people, they thought they needed to change who people were. And there could be a temptation to not convert people to experience the good news of Jesus, but to experience the good news of American culture. And that's wrong. That's not right. That is not what missionaries need to do. We don't need to replace people's identity with our American identity. We just need to share the gospel, the good news. And so when I see pastors doing this with people from different cultures, there's not even room in your theology to accept people from a different culture, that you have to turn them into Americans, right? You have to rewrite what they're saying, rewrite what they're doing, rewrite their identity. That does not sit right with me. And so I would urge Brandan Robertson, I would urge him to stop this racist behavior. Stop thinking like this. Accept people for who they are. That's my call to you. But for the rest of us, for most of us, the question is not, is Jesus racist? I think we know that the answer is no. I think we can read this passage. We can hop on over here and we can look through this and we can see the context of what's going on here. We see up at the top of the chapter that Jesus is having an argument with Pharisees and scribes about cultural identity of what it means to be the people of Israel. And they're taking this hardline legalistic approach. And this legalistic approach is actually excluding other people. And it's actually, they're looking at themselves from a position of power. And they're attacking Jesus. They're rejecting him, right? They're holding on. They have no humility. And when Jesus, he puts them in a more humble place and he criticizes them and he calls them out as hypocrites, they reject him. And ultimately, we know where this story is going, that they're going to crucify him. But here, right now, in this context of this passage, they reject him. But when you scroll down a little further, Jesus leaves this place and immediately goes to Tyre, and he meets this woman. And she is also put in a kind of humble place, a place of Jesus saying, that it wouldn't be right to feed, the dogs. He doesn't use a racial slur here. He just uses a normal word for more of like actually a puppy or something, a family pet, which culturally makes more sense. It's how the woman receives it. You can see that. She says, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. She understands what kind of dog, that this is not a slur. It's a dog that is a pet at the table. And she's saying, please just let me experience some of the crumbs. Let me experience a small taste of what you have to offer as the Messiah of Israel. And this is the contrast. It's not that Jesus is belittling this woman, but that two people, the Jewish leaders and this woman, both should be in a humble place before the Lord. But the Jewish leaders reject that humble place. And this woman, the hero of this chapter, accepts Jesus as Lord and comes to him humbly. And as a result, she experiences his grace. And so, the answer to this question is not so hard. Jesus was not a racist. Reverend Robertson, he got this one wrong. And it would be really easy for us to look at him and be judgmental and think, wow, look how great we are that we know more than this TikTok pastor. And that's not what the story is calling for. That would actually be us moving towards being like the Pharisees ourselves. I think the invitation of this passage is to be like the woman, to come in humility, to come at Jesus' feet and say, yes, Lord, to submit to him, to look that we don't have it all figured out, we don't know all the answers, and that the best thing we can do is get the scraps from the table of Jesus. Not to see ourselves as up here, not to see ourselves as entitled and deserving, but to recognize how undeserving we are and how gracious God is to us. So that's my prayer for you, that you can experience the grace of a gracious God, that you can come to him humbly, that I can come to him humbly and experience the scraps at his table, because they're more than we could ever ask for or imagine.